All right, welcome football fans to a Wednesday episode of the Call Sheet Daily podcast here at the Fans First Sports Network. I'm your host, Kevin Smith. It is our Whiteboard Wednesday segment where we dive into the scheme and issues pertaining to the coaching world. And returning to the show for, I don't know, Steve, what time is this? Third, fourth time? Something like that?
Third time.
Third time's the charm. That's right. Coach Steve Scanlon, proud to have Steve back on the show. So welcome, Coach.
Thanks, Coach. I really appreciate jumping on. I love the opportunity to talk, and I love hearing all the people that you have on as well.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a great opportunity to get to know guys, not just in South Jersey, but to reach out to coaches really all around the East Coast and hopefully around the country. We're going to talk about a venture that you're going to be involved in with me and several other coaches, the launch of our Coach Cast podcast network. And hopefully that'll give us a real expanded reach. And we'll be talking to people from all over the place.
Yeah, I'm excited. I can't wait.
Yeah, me neither. So, all right, we'll get to Coach Cast. But first, let's talk about our subject at hand. We are in the state of New Jersey, and in New Jersey, we have just entered into the summer season, which runs until about the first week of August, and really where there aren't a whole lot of rules. I mean, you're pretty much allowed to practice as much as you want. I mean, there are some restrictions on things like contact and having practices with other schools and things like that. But for the most part, you've kind of got free reign. And that's both exciting and kind of daunting. I mean, it can be a challenge to strike the right notes in summer. So our topic today is, how do you orchestrate your summer practices? What do you do to prepare your football team in the summer for its fall schedule? So I'm going to start with this question for Steve real quick. You go into something like this, it's a blank slate, right? Where do you start? How do you determine the goals or the needs for your program as you head into the summer schedule?
So I think of what you just pointed out about in the state of New Jersey. So, Coach, for people who don't know, I was a head coach in high school in New Jersey, and then I left and took a college coaching job. And when I left, it was April, and we were just starting spring ball, or March, and we were just starting spring ball. It was awesome. The whole time I kept texting guys back home. I'm like, hey, man, we need to figure out how to push and figure out how to do some version of a spring ball because this is incredible. But then the part I didn't think about is, you finish up your spring ball, you have your finals, your players go home typically, at the level I was at the beginning of May, and then you don't see them until camp again. Whereas compared to New Jersey, like we have this rhythm, we just kind of jump into each season where we can kind of get our teams ready. I think it's probably a blend at the high school level here of where most guys probably, this is a cliche answer, but they do what they've always done, whether that's how they structure things like a mini camp or what 7-and-7s they're going to be involved in, or, how they're going to practice or work out. I think it's kind of that, but coaches typically fit and know what needs for their program they have. For me, I always thought of like, I want to win games in October, not necessarily June. So I kind of thought, I didn't want to be chasing trophies in June 7-on-7s in the summer. Like I wanted a championship in the fall, right? So that was kind of always in the forefront of my mind, was like, this has to build towards, right? And if something was too much for not adding to that fall, I didn't necessarily want to do it. That was just kind of from my experience. So for me, I really like that you get an ability to kind of train without distractions. There's no school day. There's no other activities kind of going on. There's a clean break from in-season other sports. Like obviously there's, your summer league baseball, your summer league basketball, some travel lacrosse, things like that. But it's kind of a time to turn a page and like start anew. Like it's got a really good vibe to it. We always tried to grade, like we would grade our players at the end of the season and meet with them and tell them like, hey, here's some strengths, here's some weaknesses, here's what you need to improve. And then each grade had like, so an A+ was like an all South Jersey or all state level of player. A C- might be a JV level or varsity backup rotational player. So we would show kids kind of where they stood, but then that would help us coaches kind of figure out like, all right, here's something we think could be a core strength. Here's something we're really going to have to focus on our development heading into that next phase, getting closer and closer to the season. But most of all, it's really kind of a chance each year. Probably guys' summers might be a little different from program to program of what they did previously. But overall, it's a great time to teach. And I think that's a great opportunity to refresh and kind of jump into.
Yeah. You mentioned 7-on-7s. You and I are kind of on the same page on this. I see some value in it, but it's not something I've become overly invested in simply because it doesn't mimic really what you're going to do on a football field in the fall. There are elements of it that are good, repetitions between quarterbacks and receivers and things like that. And there are things that where you can spend an awful lot of time getting ready for a 7-on-7. That's not going to necessarily help you when it matters most. So I'm with you on that. Let me ask you this. You mentioned teaching, and obviously that's a huge focus in the summertime. But there are a lot of things when you're running a program. You've been a head coach. I've been a head coach. You have to look at your program and say, what are we going to focus on in the next 6 weeks of this open summer session? Strength and conditioning. Is it going to be install and execution? Is it going to be team building and culture? Did you like to really pick a theme, or are you trying to hit on all of that?
Yeah, I think so I think coaches are incredible multitaskers, and not to kind of cop out on it, but so a few years ago, I had applied for a Division I job, and they had a formal application on it, and it had like, tasks, duties, and responsibilities. And I was reading through them, and I sent them to a couple people, and I was laughing. I'm like, 9 out of 10 high school coaches that I talk to do these things nonstop without batting an eye. Like, the amount of circles you have to move in and things you kind of have to juggle. So I don't think it's like beyond a coach to say like all of them is what you need to focus on, but guys definitely do. I know one of the main things for me is that, like, especially during June and July, um, like that eval season, two things were less of a priority. So it's not like we were only focusing on one portion. Like, the strength and conditioning aspect to me, like, always, like, that's almost like your rent. Like, you had to do that or kids are going to get hurt. And at least where I was at, we weren't going to be successful. Like, we just didn't have the talent and raw strength and size that you could kind of get away without doing that. And too many programs are too good where that's like, it's not as much a difference maker when you do it, but it eliminates you if you don't do it. So like, that's kind of always there. But for me, it was, um, we wanted to dive into, like, my execution and X's and O's wasn't the primarily important thing. Like, we were focusing on teaching new skills. We were maybe working on gelling as a staff if there were new coaches and things like that. Guys were learning new positions. We might have some schematic changes, but we weren't worried about, how I need to play to hit in October was not necessarily how I needed to hit the second week of June. The other thing I really always try to use this time for is the cultural aspect. So one of my favorite books is like, by a guy named Randy Jackson. He's a high school coach in Texas, and it's like Culture Defeats Strategy. It's like 7 lessons in leadership from a high school football coach. And then Paulsboro has a legendary head coach named Glenn Howard, who had retired a couple years ago. And one of my coaches played for him and coached with him and was, we'll talk about the things he did. He's incredible. And he used to have like a theme of the week for every game and practice culturally. And he'd assign it to a different coach in the off season. And that coach will be responsible about, hey, today we're talking about overcoming adversity. You have the pre-practice talk, post-practice talk all week, and he'd guide them, but he kind of had it organized. So that's like something I try to build towards. I'm not there yet, but it's something where I think if you can take the time in the summer to invest in that, when maybe you're not under as strict of a time crunch, it's something that can pay off for you in the fall when it's harder to consciously plan that kind of stuff. So those are 2 areas where I'm trying to teach and develop, and your scheme takes a backseat a little bit. And what can we do culturally that could pay off in the long run in the future?
Excellent. Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I always tried to make summer challenging for them and throw adversity at them that they would have to learn to deal with. Better than learning to deal with it in July than having to learn to deal with it in September. By September, you have to be ready for it. You can't be learning on the job at that point. So we would challenge them in the weight room, on the field, in terms of their conditioning, make them do hard things together, make them encourage each other, make them fail, because they need to understand failure and then what it takes to overcome failure. And those were big things that we emphasized. And I always tried to use the summer session too, to go back to a point you made, for teaching, because you know how it is when you get to the regular season. You have limited practice time. You're so invested in scheme and in your opponent that you lose the ability, just from a time standpoint, to smooth out the rough edges, to teach some of the technique things. So man, if your guard is got to pull and you want him scraping off the butt of the down block when he climbs to the second level, you better rep the hell out of that in summer, because
Yeah.
you're just probably not going to get the time to do it as much in the regular season. So I love that. I love it. It's the summertime, man. It's putting your hands in the clay. There's nothing more
Yeah.
exciting than that as a coach. There is, though, with coaches, a tendency, because we love the game so much. We're kind of diseased. We've built our entire lives around this. We're grown men and still, essentially, quote unquote, playing the game of football. But there's a tendency. We could do this every day.
Yeah.
Like we could go coach nonstop and be happy to do it. But kids are kids. So how do you strike the balance? How do you know? I'll phrase it like this. How do you know when in the summertime, when kids, we live at the beach too, when kids want to go to the beach and kids want to hang out with their friends and et cetera. How do you know when to push them, man? When to give them the whip and when to pull off? What is too much? Because obviously you don't want to burn them out.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a balance that's probably different from year to year and maybe even from kid to kid on your team. Um, Overall, though, like this time of year, like there's an excitement. Like we were talking before we started recording, like we're kind of in around South Jersey. We're in mini camp season, right? So it's the first week we're fully cleared by the rules to be able to participate with our team and coach them with a ball. And everywhere over South Jersey's kind of copied the same thing where we're doing it. And there's an excitement to that. It's almost like that baseball opening day feeling. And what we try to do is so I think I know I had mentioned before, like I remember back to one season in particular. I was working at a school. It was my first season working at a school. We had a ton of snow, so our last school day was Monday, June 26th. I was the last person to sign out in the building. Walked out back. It was like 1 o'clock or something like that, and we went to. I had 5.5 hours of football. It was like 2 hours in a weight room, 2.5 hours out on the field. Like it was. There was a freshman group came in and lift. Like it was challenging. Like it was miserable. And that program, that team was one of the most deadly teams to see week one. Like you did not want to see that team come week one. Well, once September turned to October, that team would struggle. And I don't think it was a coincidence that, they were so heavily invested and did so many things well, but they just kind of maybe struggled at times, or maybe players struggled at times, or to find the balance of how are we staying sharp and not becoming dull, that kind of thing. So I know that was one of the challenges. To me, something we always look at is we scale down. Like we actually do less. Like we always want people kind of chomping at the bit, wanting more. So I copied this when I was a head coach. We mirror it now where I'm at EHT High School. Coach Davis, he kind of adopted it and really liked how it panned out. But we do 3 days a week. We do in middle of the week. We actually go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We go for a lifting period. We're out on the field a little bit. We pick up 1 to 2 7-on-7s. But we're out of the way of where I'm at now is a little closer before. But when I was at Clearview, if people wanted to go down to the beach for a long weekend, well, Thursday after your lift, you could do that. You didn't have to be back till Tuesday morning. We defer 100% to other sports. So if you have summer league basketball, if you're playing travel lacrosse, travel baseball, like I was just thinking today, I've had, in 5 short years as a head coach, I had 7 Division I baseball players that baseball was their main sport that started for me on a football field that helped us win multiple playoff games. Like you're not, especially baseball, you're not getting them if you make them pick. So that was something that we always try to do as well, of finding that balance. And again, like my main goal, and I would say to my coaches, like, guys, we want to be really dangerous come Halloween. And like, not that you ever want to sacrifice a game in September, but I never want it to be the reverse. Like that team was really, really good in the beginning of the season. What happened? So that was something we always focused on, and just continuing to develop and find players and find roles and how can you get them on the field. So that's something we always try to keep in mind. And it's like, don't burn the steak. Like that's something we kind of think about as well.
Yeah. Good points. The rules about contact in New Jersey are kind of a little bit vague. You can get into full pads. It's actually when I explain the whole thing, it's a ridiculous.
Yeah, it
It's a
doesn't
ridiculous rule
quite
where
make sense.
yeah, you can actually get into full pads if you have board approval from your district in July. But then when the regular season practices officially start in August, you have to go through a almost week-long acclimation period where you can only be in helmets and then you can only be in uppers and then you can finally get into full pads. So it's ass backwards, man, the way
Yeah.
that they kind of do it here. But if you wanted to, you could be in full pads hitting all through July.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Yeah, I'm kind of against it. Like
Yeah.
I said, like I'm not keeping Division I baseball players if I have them hitting all summer in June and July in pads. Same thing with lacrosse. Like we had lacrosse All Americans. You're not keeping them on the team if you're making them hit all June and July. But I don't knock teams that it works for them. I do kind of like that we have some freedom and leeway to that the coach that's in charge of each program can do what's best for his players. I do like that. But to me, like I want to keep guys fresh. I want to keep them excited. I want to keep them running around. I want to keep them excited and learning. And I do think like, there's a pitch count on the body. Like I remember now I was fortunate enough to play on some college football teams that we had gone to Division III Final Four multiple times. And like I think about how long that season was and the wear and tear. And then you say, okay, well, take a couple years off the age of those players, take off some physical development and strength and think about that as well. And I just defer to the less is more model and until it burns me, like that's how I kind of look at it as well. But I do think that I had kind of tried to lean into a formula of, and I know we're going to talk about how do you know when your team's ready? What do you do to get the team ready? But I always felt I was not winning or losing because of what I did or didn't do in pads or in helmets in June and July. So just something for me, what worked best for the kids I had and where I think we're at now with Coach Davis, I think we have a pretty good balance of a gradual build and that the excitement of what we're looking forward to, because whether you're doing it in June or July or not, there's still nothing like Friday Night Lights in the fall.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I've never in 14 years as a head coach, I never put our team in pads in July. I just didn't see the benefit of it. I felt like we had plenty of time in August to get ready. And you said, you used the word hungry. You absolutely want them hungry for that real contact. One of the most electric days in our program every year is our first live drill, which doesn't happen until in August when we're now allowed to get into pads for the first time. And it's the first full day in pads. And we do a drill I stole when I went out to Pittsburgh Steelers training camp, covering the Steelers for Fans First, and saw Mike Tomlin, and they call it 7 shots. The offense gets the ball on the 2-yard line against the first team offense, first team defense, best on best. And they run 7 plays, first team to 4. Offense scores, they get a point. Defense stops them, they get a point. First team to 4 wins. And that is electric. And that's the kind of enthusiasm that we want to create for the contact. And I don't know if you get that if you're hitting all July.
Yeah.
Just try to avoid that. So, all right, you mentioned this question, and I absolutely want to ask you this because I think this is really important. How do you know? And maybe you don't. Maybe you never know. But how do you know when your team is approaching game readiness? You've spent all this time in the summer, you plan, you practice, you overanalyze, you watch the film, blah, blah, blah. Do you ever reach a point where you're like, we're ready to go, man? Let's go. Bring it on week 1.
Yeah, I think you kind of get a feel. You're right. You don't definitively know, but I think you do get a picture like all through the off season. You can kind of feel that pulse. And like you mentioned, kind of that clay forming into what your team's going to be based on how are your weight room workouts? How are guys that aren't in the weight room because they're playing other sports? How are those teams doing? Like typically, like if you're wrestling, if you're basketball, if you're track and field and lacrosse and baseball are making deep playoff runs and your guys are a part of that and they're active key members of those teams, like that's a good sign too. And then what you're doing in the weight room, the vibes and the energy and the gains and the development you're seeing in there and really the commitment, are guys there consistently, like that starts to formulate it. And then you kind of have these little gauges, like we're in a mini camp right now. And, with Coach Davis, this is going into our 3rd season at EHT. And, we always say like teams fluctuate and go up and down when they graduate, but programs win. And like we're trying to grow and continue and develop into a program. And we had our first offensive one yesterday, offensive practice session. And by the end of it, I'm like, Coach, we could run plays. Like we could execute plays in a scrimmage, right now. Like it, and that was a really good sign. That's a positive sign. I think you get a feeling through 7-on-7 and your summer workouts and energy. But to me, I always thought it was through your scrimmages. So I always felt like really for a season, probably by game 3 or 4, your team was really crystallizing into like, okay, here's our formula. Here's what we do when we need to move the ball. Here's who we go to when we need a big play. Here's our answers to create stops, force turnovers, whatever it might be. Like you kind of learn the recipe for winning a game on a Friday night. And again, I was always really focused on October. So I kind of went back in my short time as a head coach. Teams were 13-1 in October. And like that's when you're moving towards playoff time. So like I felt like we were doing something that was really on the right track and right by that game. But I also think it's that formula for kind of scrimmages. So we talk about you rev up to your full pads. The first day that we can in our program, we try to have a inter squad scrimmage as best as possible. Like we've drafted teams where it's kind of even half and half. Then we just went like first team O against best D, second team O against next best D, like that kind of session. But we wanted it as game like as possible. We wanted to try to scrimmage a quad scrimmage where we saw 3 other teams, 3 other defenses, 3 other offenses, and we tried to hand select like well coached physical teams. Like whether it's a team we think could beat us or not, if it was a team that we would know physically we'd have to step up to compete with, that's really what we wanted out of that scrimmage, regardless of the result. And then a game scrimmage, we want to play into past halftime against another team that's really physical. And then I felt like if you got those 4 game-like settings, 5 game-like settings, you could be as ready as you could be for as quick as week 0 kind of creeps up on us. So that's kind of how I always looked at it. So you're right. You don't really know, but I think once you get those 3 or 4 opponents that you see, you start to really get a gauge of what kind of team we can and can't be.
Yeah. I found for good and for bad, I found that the game scrimmage doesn't lie. That a lot of time, unless you're playing a really weak opponent, but like you said, you try to create a challenging summer environment, and that includes the teams you schedule for scrimmages.
Definitely.
We almost always schedule really good programs in our game scrimmage. And when we step up against them, it usually goes well for us in week 1. And when we back down from that team or aren't ready or whatever reason, oftentimes you're going to struggle earlier in your season. So I guess there is a level of preparedness that you can feel comfortable with by the time you get to late August.
Yeah, and I think back to, so I had a team that we lost in double overtime of a championship. We graduated 18 starters, right? And we came back and it was a bunch of kids that saw that run, but really didn't kind of put the work in for it. And we played a Kingsway team down here, which is, I think Coach Hendricks has been to 5 championships now. He's won like 3 of them. And he's kind of racking them up quietly. Great coach. And then we played them week 0, and then we had another opponent we felt really good about, which we took care of business. But I remember like our 4th game, we were playing a team, Highland Regional. Coach Brian Leary, Coach John Smalls were there. And we had just played them in the semifinals the year before that, and we played them week 1 the same season. And we knew like this is a tough, battle-tested, like one of the best teams in Group 4. And I did not think we were ready to kind of meet that challenge. But I needed us to get in the fight, if that makes sense. And we did. And like they won the game, which didn't really surprise me and probably didn't surprise many people, but our team responded. And then it was like from then on, I think we won out the rest of our games and we're in the playoffs. And I was like, you know what? If we had to play that team again in the playoffs, I felt really, really good. And it would have still been as challenging, and we probably still wouldn't have been favored, but like I knew what that program was all about. And like sometimes you need teams like that to see where you stack up against them because you know how good they are.
Yeah. Confidence is funny, man. We're coaching young kids.
Yeah.
And confidence is a great motivator for them. You build a little bit of it, it can go a long way.
Definitely.
Coach, great stuff. I hope you obviously are having an excellent summer ahead. We're gonna actually be in your quad scrimmage when we get to August. Before we go though, let's talk real quick. We are, as a group here at FFSN, launching a subsidiary of the network that will be called CoachCast. It is a podcast network for coaches. It's going to be across multiple sporting spectrums, so it won't just be football coaches. My college roommate, 30-year college baseball coach, excellent baseball coach, Wayne Mazzoni, is going to join us. Some of the coaches from the area, Paul Callahan, who's been on this call sheet show many times, former college coach, now coaching at Ocean City High School. He's going to be with us. We're going to have Jimmy Haratopoulos is going to be with us, Andrew Daly. So I think we're going to have some good coaches. Those are the ones on board, and we're reaching out to new coaches every day. And, of course, Steve's going to be with us as well. So I want to give Steve a minute to talk about what's he got planned for CoachCast.
Yeah, thanks, Coach. I'm incredibly grateful. And obviously, I think you inviting me on here has given me an opportunity to try to make this happen. So thank you very, very much for having me be a part of this. For me, I always feel like with coaching, like I have a ton of respect for so many programs and coaches that I can learn from. But I always thought, too, that like I don't know that I can ever catch, like you mentioned, Coach Cal. I don't know that I'm ever going to catch the level expertise that he has, especially in development of a pass game and an offense. Same thing, I think, at defense and special teams. Like, I don't know that I'll ever catch up to the expertise of scheme. But when I always looked at a program, I always tried to think like there's aspects around a program that play a part in a game that you can't particularly measure or equate or come up with a formula like of. So like how well your team gets along. That might sound dumb. I don't know a practice plan for it, but if your team's incredibly tight, they're going to come out more of one-score games than a team that doesn't really get along. I think if your team has eaten lunch together since they were in fourth grade, right? Like if you had, I remember I had a set of cousins that were on our team or brothers that played together. Like those teams have a bond that kind of face that adversity a little tougher than maybe teams that are missing those things. If you can celebrate your program and make it larger than just a high school sport, and it feels like a larger than life thing in town or in school or to the people that are a part of it and feel celebrated. Like, I think those things add up and can make a difference. So I know when I was always a coach, I wanted to dive into what makes a program special and what about programs attract players and people and make them want to be a part of it. Kind of my idea in coaching is, and in this podcasting, and setting up shows and interviewing people is what are the things that you do that make your program unique and special and make one of people be a part of it. So that's kind of what I wanted to explore. And like, I remember even all the way back to, so when I was in high school, like a town over was Cherokee, and they would do things like, so it was Sal's Pizza Shop. And every Monday they would have like $5 all you can eat pizza for Cherokee football. And I thought it was the coolest thing, like, so I'm always very interested in what is around your program that makes it special and unique, that people want to be a part of it and helps you win a game in maybe ways that you can't measure. So I want to kind of explore all ideas like that. I want to talk about things that what motivates people to coach. Like, what do you bring to the table as a coach? Like for me, I think about my dad all the time. My dad passed away 20 years ago now. And with him in particular, he had an incredible skill set to build confidence in young athletes. And I don't know where he got it from. Like he played sports. He was a very good football player, an athlete, and track athlete, but he wasn't a coach, and he was an intelligent guy, but he was blue collar. He was a roofer. And that skill is really unique. Like, I love the idea of that and thinking about people's coaching influences or inspirations. Like, some of the reasons I decided I wanted to become a coach were like, inspired by, for me, my younger brother. So I look up to my younger brother. To me, he's the best high school football player I ever saw in person, my brother, Sean. As he was being recruited, I was really sick. I was in and out of the hospital. Our dad passed away. He had an incredible amount of pressure on him to deliver. And he had like 14, 15 offers. He hurt his shoulder, ended up going to University of Delaware, great program. He lettered as a quarterback. He lettered and ended up starting as a safety. But that process and kind of everything that went on, like, I don't know that I know everyone had great intentions for it. His coach had stopped coaching going into a senior year, kind of a critical time of recruitment during that. And I don't know that I don't know that all things panned out to 100% of his benefit. Maybe they did, but one of the things that inspired me as a coach is when I get a Sean Scanlon, I want to be able to make sure that he maximizes 100% of his opportunity. Now, in the big picture, he went to school for free at a time where my family was financially hurting, played Division I football, did a great job, makes a ton of money, is incredibly successful today. Like, so it all sorted out. But it's something I think about. Another one, I had a really close family friend. His name was Derek Cooper. Football he didn't finish, I think, the way that brought him peace. And it led him on a path where years later, he ended up making the one mistake you can't live and learn from. We lost Eric Cooper about 10 years ago now. I think 15 actually. The years are flying by, but I think about him coaching every day. And what inspired me as a coach is when I come across players like that, I want to try to be part of the cog that helps deliver them to the most successful versions of themselves. One of the things that drives me crazy about thinking about coaching and is like the guy sitting on a bar stool reliving his glory days. Well, I don't want it to be your best days. I want it to be your launching point. And I want to explore people's experience and inspirations and wanting to be a coach and why. And to look kind of behind the curtain about like so many people when they started playing this game had dreams of going to high levels and opportunities and great experiences. And like one of the former players I coached it's going to be my first like long interview. His name's Nick Oliveira. Nick was a 4-star prospect from South Jersey. He's going into his redshirt sophomore season now at Rutgers. Nick just finished up a great spring ball. He's playing at a really high level. Well, he had offers from Oregon, from Penn State, Maryland, Pitt, like everywhere. And like, I want to show people like, hey man, how cool is it being a 4-star prospect and taking official visits? How was it seeing Oregon's football facilities? You know, like that's a really interesting thing. And Nick will have great insight on that. And I just want to show people like, hey, these are all the great things that this game can lead to for you. This is how they can serve you beyond your time, your 4 years on the field. This is how it's going to benefit you for the next 40 years of your life. So I kind of want to go into some, maybe some heavier topics of inspiration, but some really great things and exciting things about positive experiences and really like we are all here to try to help someone else. So I think if we can look at those stories and those opportunities through the game of football, like I'm really excited for it. Can't wait to learn and have people share those stories as well.
That sounds awesome, Coach. And I really feel like this is going to be a platform where your experience, the people who you know in the game who can share their experiences will be things that whether you're a coach or just a fan of the game that you're going to learn from, whether you're somebody who's just looking for interesting aspects about life, you're going to learn from it. So hopefully that'll be that vision will come to fruition and we'll be able to launch a network that's valuable and meaningful for people.
Yeah, I can't wait, man. I'm really hoping to record my first couple episodes through this week. So I have topics ready to go. Excited to talk to some people. And like you said, I can't wait to learn. And I can't wait to hear people's stories.
Well, we'll be live by July 1st and we'll have a big kickoff when it launches. So look for Steve then. Steve, man, I really appreciate your time as always.
Thank you, Coach. I appreciate you.
Great stuff. All right. So that's our Whiteboard Wednesday show with Coach Steve Scanlon. Join me tomorrow, State of the Franchise. We're profiling the New England Patriots. Nick Hogan from FFSN is going to be here to talk about New England. A lot of changes up in Foxborough this offseason. We'll hit all that tomorrow. So again, for Coach Scanlon, I'm Kevin Smith. Have a great day, everybody.